Hi, it's Terry Ryder from Hotspotting, bringing you this week's edition of Hotspot of the Week. Today, in my weekly column on the Property Observer website, I wrote about the Adelaide market, which I believe is not only one of the most consistent in capital city Australia, but it's the most underrated market, definitely. Its remarkable consistency of steady performance is the hallmark of this market. It has more suburbs with rising demand right now than any other capital city in Australia, and the current number of growth markets that it has is the highest for Adelaide since we started our quarterly surveys of buyer demand 4 years ago. About 18 months ago, typical surveys, quarterly surveys, we found somewhere between 45 and 50 growth markets in Adelaide. But in the last year, in the last 12 months, the last 4 quarterly surveys, we've found over 60, somewhere between 60 and 70 in each of those quarters. So there's an elevated level of market activity happening in Adelaide, and it continues to be extremely consistent. It ranks well ahead in those terms, in terms of the number of suburbs with rising demand, according to our quarterly surveys. It continues to rank well ahead of Sydney, which has pretty much none at the moment, Melbourne, which has very few, Brisbane, which has a pretty good number, but not nearly as many as Adelaide. Also Perth, which is a recovering market and is starting to produce more and more suburbs with rising activity. But Adelaide is the leader, and it's also well ahead of most of the state regional jurisdictions, which is significant because right now we think that the strongest markets in Australia are generally found in regional Australia, but Adelaide's up there competing with the most buoyant of those regional markets, including Victoria, particularly, and also large parts of New South Wales. Now, in terms of the price data, unfortunately, media tends to use movements in median prices as the only measure of what's happening in property markets. We think there's lots of other measures. What we do with charting sales activity, sales volumes, we think is a far better indicator of which way markets are heading. And we also think rental data is important, vacancy rates figures are important. Unfortunately, media is addicted to what's happening with median prices and also to the process of just producing one figure to describe a rather large capital city. So in the case of Adelaide, those figures that come from organisations like Domain or CoreLogic, the annual growth figure for Adelaide in terms of house prices is only sort of 1 or 2%, and it gives the impression that there really isn't any major growth at all happening in Adelaide. And of course, as is always the case, when you look behind those figures and do a suburb by suburb analysis, you find that those figures are incredibly misleading. They don't tell the full story at all. So we've just recently completed our suburb by suburb analysis, and it shows that 75% of Adelaide markets have median prices higher than a year ago, and roughly half of that figure of 74% of suburban markets which have growth, about half of them have had growth of more than 5% in the last 12 months. So we analysed a sample of 199, just one short of 200 Adelaide suburban markets. 70 of them have grown by 5% or more in the last 12 months, and another 78 of those 199 markets have increased, have median prices higher than a year ago, but the growth is less than 5%. There are 23 suburbs with the annual growth in median prices has topped 10%. So there are suburbs producing big growth, such as North Adelaide, very much a growth market, just on the doorstep of the Adelaide CBD, lots of character homes, lots of apartments, very highly rated suburb. Its median house price has risen 23% in the last 12 months. Then we have other areas like Mansfield Park up 20%, Henley Beach South up 15%, and others like it. Now, it's noteworthy that many of the upper end suburbs of the Adelaide market, the ones that are recording a lot of the bigger growth, 5% up to 10%, and some even more than 20%, some of those I've just mentioned. So suburbs with median prices above 700,000, which in Adelaide terms is heading up towards the top of the market. And there are suburbs also with median prices above $1 million. Many of those have had really good annual price growth, and they include Glenelg East, Glenunga, Henley Beach South, Kensington Park, North Adelaide I mentioned, Unley and Walkerville. But the bigger growth's not all confined to the top end of the Adelaide market. There are growth suburbs where median prices have grown in the last 12 months by more than 10%, spread right across the price ranges. And it reinforces the reality that outperforming areas can always be found in any market, even when the overall growth in the market appears to be moderate only, which is the case with Adelaide, with those misleading figures published almost every day by media saying Adelaide prices are only up 1 or 2%. Many places are doing way, way better than that. And the high number of suburban markets that we've identified where sales activity is continuing to rise suggests that price growth is going to continue this year. In fact, I think we're going to see an uplift in markets generally once we get the federal election out of the way, and also as a result of the ongoing loosening of the finance restrictions that we've seen from the major lenders as they adapt to the new situation post-Royal Commission and APRA rulings. It's loosening up little by little, week by week, and we're also starting to see a little bit more positivity in media about the coverage of real estate. Increasingly, we're seeing stories that there's recovery underway and evidence of recovery in big city markets like Sydney and Melbourne. So those are the factors that are sort of holding markets back to a certain degree at the moment, that we're starting to see them loosen up. And once we get the federal election out of the way, I think we're going to see markets like Adelaide move forward quite strongly. Now, there are a number of precincts in Adelaide that are doing particularly well. The two that stand out, because what we look for is we look at sales patterns suburb by suburb, and we look for the number of suburbs in each local government area that have rising demand. Port Adelaide Enfield has been the market leader in Adelaide for the last 6 months or so, and it still is, but it now has a challenger, the Onkaparinga local government area down the far south of the Adelaide metropolitan area, a lifestyle area with some seaside suburbs and also a very highly regarded wine district. Lots of different elements to Onkaparinga. It's also got, like Port Adelaide Enfield, 8 suburbs where demand is rising, a high level of affordability, some good lifestyle elements, improved transport infrastructure, a lot of things recommending the Onkaparinga market. Then we've got the Burnside local government area, and this is one of the upmarket areas of Adelaide, closer to the CBD. Suburbs like Toorak Gardens, St George's, Kensington Gardens, Burnside itself, and Glenunga are all upwardly mobile suburbs in terms of buyer demand, and some of them are getting really good price growth at the moment. Glenunga, in the last 12 months, its median house price has risen 11% to 1.05 million, while St George's is up 18% in the last 12 months to 1.15 million. So we're seeing really good growth in some of those upmarket suburbs in the Burnside local government area of Adelaide. The Marion local government area, it's been a market leader consistently in Adelaide for the last 18 months. It appears to have sort of dropped down the rankings a little bit, but still very much an area that we rank highly, partly because it has in its midst elements like Flinders University campus, the Flinders Medical Precinct, and also the Tonsley Precinct, which is a high-tech innovation complex in a repurposed car plant where they used to make Mitsubishi cars. So there's a lot of jobs nodes and demand generators in that Marion local government area. But there are growth markets spread right across Adelaide. That's what we like about it. It's a very consistent market in all sorts of ways. There are, apart from those market leaders we mentioned, the local government areas of Port Adelaide, Onkaparinga, Burnside, Marion, there are six municipalities that have 4 or 5 rising suburban markets like Charles Sturt, Campbelltown, Holdsworth Bay, and a couple of the cheaper ones up in the far north, Playford and Salisbury. And T2 Gully also, which is a local government area which is highly consistent. 8 suburbs in that local government area have had median price growth above 5% in the last 12 months, including T2 Gully itself and Fairview Park, and they're places where median prices are in the low 400,000. So it's a well-located precinct with a high level of affordability. That's one of the great things about Adelaide. It just offers such great value for money. I really like Adelaide for lots of reasons. The underlying economy is strong and improving. It's a centre for high-tech innovation, and its growing reputation for that is creating a stronger and stronger economy. But it's the value for money in the real estate. There's lots of character, suburbs with character homes where median prices are in the 400,000s, 500,000, 600,000s, sort of areas where with their location close to the CBD, for example, perhaps, or close to the beaches, and the quality of the homes, they'd be $1 million suburbs in places like Melbourne and Sydney, but half the price or less in Adelaide. So great value for money. And if you want to go for really good value for money, really cheap real estate, up in the northern precincts, the local government areas of Playford and Salisbury, where they each have a number of growth suburbs, incredible affordability, the cheapest real estate in capital city Australia. There's a number of suburbs with median prices are below 200,000, and then plenty of others where the median prices are somewhere in the 200,000s. Suburbs like Salisbury, Hills, Andrews Farm. I mean, this is the down market part of the Adelaide market, no doubt, but if you're looking for affordable buys with really high rental yields, 6-7% in some cases, the sort of rental yields you generally can't get in major cities in Australia for houses, that's a place to look if you can get over the hump and people having their minds about it being down market and therefore considered to be a bit risky. So that's a synopsis of what's going on in Adelaide. Really underrated, deserves to be more on the radar screen of property investors than it is, and I think increasingly it will be when people start to realise what it has to offer, how solid the underlying economy is and how things are improving. And I think we'll get to a point where people sit up and really take notice of Adelaide as an economy and as a property market and wonder why all this, the great qualities that it has have gone unnoticed for so long. But I'm going to keep talking about it till somebody listens. Okay, that's it for now. That's Hotspot of the Week. If you'd like to find out more about Adelaide, we have a top 5 Adelaide hotspots report on the Hotspotting website. We also have location reports on many of the areas that I've mentioned, which can be bought individually. So I think it's worth checking out, particularly at times where investors are sort of sitting on their hands thinking, well, where are we going to find any growth? Well, this is a place where you can find it. You can buy affordably, good rental yields with good prospects for growth in a city that's going places. So consider it. That's it for now. Let's do it again same time next week. And don't forget, tomorrow night at this time we're doing my live Q&A. That's my once a month live Q&A on a Wednesday night where you get the opportunity to ask your questions. And if you're like most people, you're wanting to ask questions about a particular location that's of interest to you, well, please do so. Tune in at this time tomorrow night, and I'll do my best to answer your questions live through this medium. Okay, that's it. See you tomorrow night, hopefully. Bye for now.